The stars had always been a frontier for wonder, until they turned hostile. It began quietly. The Martian outpost, designated Halcyon Red, stopped transmitting. No distress beacon. No warning. Just silence. Earth Command assumed a systems failure, but when the next ship sent to investigate vanished, the illusion of control shattered. Within 72 hours, 3 outer colonies ceased all contact. It wasn't a malfunction. Something was hunting them. The first intercepted footage confirmed it. Grainy, fractured visuals showed silhouettes, tall, angular forms with armor that shifted like liquid shadow. Eyes glowing like embers. They moved with a predatory grace, too fluid to be mechanical, too coordinated to be anything less than intelligent. What followed was worse. The brief audio fragments, screams, static, and a strange clicking language, conveyed not warfare, but slaughter. The enemy called themselves the Zartak. They didn't broadcast demands or issue ultimatums. They arrived, eradicated, and moved on. Their vessels appeared without warning and vanished just as quickly, striking like cosmic phantoms. Earth's finest analysts pieced together fragments of ancient alien records, revealing a horrifying truth. The Zartak were not conquerors. They were apex predators. For millennia, they had prowled the galaxy, seeking intelligent life not for alliance, but for the hunt. Civilizations far more advanced than humanity had fallen to them. The Zartak didn't want resources or territory. They existed solely to pursue worthy prey. Civilizations that resisted were pursued with greater fervor. Those that surrendered were culled dispassionately. According to recovered data, humanity had now drawn their attention due to a simple trait: unpredictability. Their first major strike came on Mars. Over 10,000 colonists, trained personnel, and soldiers vanished in less than 6 minutes. Surveillance logs showed orbital defenses failing without resistance, some corrupted from within. The attackers moved with preternatural efficiency, each strike a calculated kill. The Mars station's internal audio feed recorded one last transmission from a technician hiding in the vents. "They don't take prisoners. They're smiling." Earth's population, still basking in the glory of interstellar expansion, plunged into disbelief. The media called them ghosts. The military branded them as Category 0, unknown threat, total hostile intent. Political divisions crumbled overnight. Survival became the sole agenda. But even that hope was fading fast. Within a month, asteroid mining rigs fell silent. Luna's far-side colony lost contact. No one knew who'd be next. Command strategies were rendered useless. By the time defenses were mobilized, the Zartak had already passed through. They had mapped human vulnerabilities faster than any AI. They avoided direct confrontation unless it ensured a clean kill. They didn't need war. They were orchestrating extinction. One salvaged fragment of Zartak communication, auto-translated by Earth's linguistics AI, sent a chill through every analyst. Primitive. Feral sentience. Uncoordinated, but promising resistance response time. Proceed to engage. Potential for sport-grade evolution moderate. Earth was being ranked, graded like cattle before a culling. Humanity wasn't even seen as an enemy, just an opportunity to sharpen their hunt. Amid mounting panic, the UN collapsed. The World Defense Council was formed overnight, transferring global military power to a single body. For the first time in history, Earth prepared for unified war. But unity wasn't enough. The first spaceborne defense fleet launched toward Titan, where Zartak signals had spiked, was annihilated before reaching orbit. Only one escape pod made it back. The pilot inside had clawed out his own eyes. A psychological warfare report theorized the Zartak emitted a field designed to induce fear and hallucinations. A bioengineered terror effect, honed over centuries. They weren't just killing, they were consuming morale. The world teetered on the edge. For the first time since the emergence of humanity, there was no doubt a greater predator had entered the food chain. Children were moved to underground cities. Orbital elevators went dark. Satellites blacked out at random intervals. Every skywatcher knew, those stars that blinked unnaturally? They weren't stars. They were eyes. But even as the predators closed in, a spark flickered in the shadows. Not hope, not yet. Just the last gasp of a species with nowhere left to run. And for a predator like the Zartak, that spark, cornered, desperate, irrational, would prove to be the most dangerous of all. The first breakthrough came from the wreckage of a downed Zartak scout ship in low Earth orbit. It hadn't crashed by chance. It was dragged down by a hacked gravitational tether deployed in desperation by a retreating human defense satellite. The ship's hull, once thought to be made of advanced alloys, turned out to be an organic composite, alive on a cellular level. When Earth's best minds examined the remains, they realized the Zartak hadn't built their technology. They had grown it. Inside, they found one corpse, intact, heavily armored, and massive. The biology was horrifying. Muscle fibers fused with bone plates, organs protected by dense mesh cartilage, no traditional nervous system. Neural signals were transmitted via an internal lattice of bioluminescent tendrils. Worse, the body showed no clear weaknesses, vital organs were distributed redundantly, and pain receptors were virtually absent. Autopsy footage revealed serrated fangs coated in a bacterial venom designed to keep prey conscious and paralyzed. It wasn't about efficiency. It was about domination. Analysis of the communication system uncovered a bio-coded pulse network. The Zartak didn't speak in the way humans understood. They pulsed electrochemical signals through living transmitters embedded into their own vessels and armor. They weren't individuals. They were nodes in a predatory hive, linked yet autonomous, processing information with collective instinct rather than conscious strategy. Their command structure was based on combat merit, not rank. Whoever hunted best led. Linguistic algorithms ran constant analysis on audio logs and intercepted signals. A pattern emerged. Humans were always referred to as feral sentients. It wasn't an insult, it was a classification. Not livestock. Not prey. But creatures just evolved enough to pose a mild challenge. The term implied experimentation, a test subject class. The implication was chilling. They didn't come to kill humanity out of malice. They came to measure us. With that insight, the first adaptive counter-initiative was born, Project Revenant. The goal was simple: build a human soldier that could mirror the Zartak's lethality, not through brute strength, but calculated mimicry. Dr. Malik, a leading cyberneticist who had lost his family during the fall of Europa Station, spearheaded the research. Volunteers were drawn from the last remnants of special operations units. Augmentations focused on sensory enhancement, neuroreaction time, and suppressing fear responses. The Zartak relied on overwhelming their target's psychology, so humans would erase that vulnerability. A Revenant's eyes could see into infrared and ultraviolet. Reflex responses were shortened to 1/10 of a second. Artificial pheromone emitters allowed limited manipulation of Zartak tracking behavior. They weren't trying to match the enemy, they were becoming something worse in their eyes: unpredictable, adaptable, irrational predators. During testing, one Revenant managed to infiltrate a simulation of a Zartak vessel and dismantle every combat drone using improvised tools, attacking from blind angles, exploiting behavioral gaps in their algorithms. When the recording was reviewed by High Command, it was clear: the Zartak weren't designed to fight prey that fought back like predators. But even more critical was a breakthrough in psychological warfare. Behavioral analysts noticed that Zartak always paused during combat when one of their own was slain. It wasn't mourning, it was analysis. They hadn't evolved in an ecosystem with rivals. They were apex from birth. The moment one of their own died in a way they couldn't predict, their system stalled. Confusion crept in. That delay, even half a second, could be exploited. It became the cornerstone of human resistance tactics: provoke, confuse, destabilize. Tech labs worked around the clock to generate countermeasures. Jammers mimicked Zartak pulses to inject false commands into enemy units. Acoustic weapons reproduced panic signals recorded from dying Zartak scouts, creating battlefield hesitation. These weren't conventional weapons, they were psychological knives, sharpened to exploit ancient predatory arrogance. For the first time, humanity stopped reacting. They began planning. The idea that had once been unthinkable now took form in war rooms across the globe: strike first. The question was no longer how to survive. It was whether the Zartak could survive a war on humanity's terms. The predators hadn't expected resistance. They certainly hadn't expected a species capable of dissecting their biology, unraveling their communication, and weaponizing their behavior against them. What they didn't understand, what no species ever had, was the simple human truth. We don't adapt because we're smart. We adapt because extinction is not an option. The invasion of Earth was not an assault, it was an execution. The Zartak struck in coordinated waves, targeting every major communications hub, orbital defense array, and high-density population center in a matter of hours. Cities were incinerated mid-broadcast. Satellites were hijacked to transmit their arrival. Civilians watched helplessly as the sky turned black and the stars blinked out behind their warships. Traditional warfare collapsed immediately. Drones lost signal. Air defense grids were sabotaged from within. The few remaining military units that managed to mobilize were shredded by plasma bursts that sliced through steel like cloth. Entire battalions vanished with no remains. Ground-level combat didn't happen often. When it did, it was short. Zartak kill teams operated with surgical precision, eliminating leadership, medics, and communications first. Once blind and leaderless, human forces folded. Command bunkers went dark one by one. Nuclear retaliation was attempted but neutralized mid-flight by energy shields integrated into Zartak orbitals. The enemy didn't respond with escalation. They didn't need to. Each strike was final. In the ashes of New Santiago, a transmission bled across unencrypted military channels. A woman's voice, hoarse and shaking, whispered into static. "They're not killing everyone, they're watching who runs." That detail changed everything. Panic overtook resistance. Civilians flooded underground transit systems and bunkers. The global network went offline as Zartak weapons pulsed electromagnetic disruption through the atmosphere. Survivors became nomads, living beneath ruins, scavenging from broken machines, avoiding exposure. No one knew who was still alive. No one knew where to strike back. In that silence, remnants of military units began forming fragmented cells. One of them, led by former Special Forces Commander Reina Talos, intercepted a Zartak patrol in the Andes and managed to down a scout flyer using scavenged fusion mines and improvised explosives. It was the first confirmed kill on Earth soil. More importantly, they recovered enemy tech, intact and still transmitting. With it, Dr. Malik re-entered the war. Hidden in a mountain research station powered by geothermal reactors, he reactivated a segment of Project Revenant and made contact with Talos. She brought more than bodies. She brought names, coordinates, and a plan. They didn't aim to defeat the Zartak conventionally. They aimed to destabilize their confidence. Guerrilla warfare was initiated on all continents simultaneously. Ambushes in sewer systems, rigged demolition traps in skyscrapers, sound-based disorientation pulses embedded in abandoned drones, all focused on disrupting the enemy's pattern recognition. The Zartak had never fought an enemy that didn't play by rules. That confusion was critical. Their decision-making algorithms weren't built for chaos. The first true counterstrike occurred in Jakarta. A resistance cell detonated a Starcore reactor within a grounded Zartak carrier. Over 300 Zartak soldiers were vaporized. The crater glowed for days. More shocking was the data burst the ship had begun transmitting seconds before destruction, an alert, not a command, pulsing in distress. The Hive had never known loss on that scale from prey. Recordings of that explosion circulated through the Resistance network. One clip went viral in every survivor channel, a revenant in battle armor, face hidden, standing on the ridge over the blast zone, shouting into a calm beacon. "We are not prey. We are the storm." Those 6 words became a rallying cry. Recruitment surged. Hidden bunkers transformed into mobile labs and armories. Every failed attack taught new tactics. Humans didn't recover the same way other species did. They mutated, mentally and tactically. They redefined the battlefield. What began as survival turned into something colder: precision retaliation. Talos coordinated strikes with clockwork timing, drawing on her experience in zero-G assault operations. Malek accelerated the Revenant program, now field-testing new neural link interfaces that allowed soldiers to interpret enemy pheromone trails and counter them with false signals. The hunted had learned the scent of the hunter. The Zartak began pulling back from the surface. They weren't retreating out of fear, they were recalculating. But it was the first time they'd ever had to. Humanity's pain didn't unify it. Pain alone never had. But pain followed by knowledge, pain weaponized, became something different. It became momentum. The predators had torn Earth apart expecting screams. Instead, they heard silence, followed by one sentence carried across every resistance signal. "You taught us fear. Now learn what we do with it." The war shifted when a Revenant strike team infiltrated a Zartak relay station on Ganymede and extracted the unthinkable, a navigational archive of the Predator fleet. The data was fragmented, written in nonlinear code using bioluminescent matrices, but it revealed something that changed the trajectory of the conflict. The Zartak weren't invincible. They had a homeworld. Designated by ancient stellar charts as YX647, it wasn't marked as a capital or stronghold. It was categorized as a sanctuary zone, a place their ships periodically returned to for regeneration. It housed no visible military installations. Its surface was covered in spire-like structures with thermal outputs too low for industry. More analysis revealed why. It wasn't a hub of power. It was their origin. Every Zartak grown in artificial wombs drew genetic source data from a core matrix hidden beneath the planet's surface. This was no command center. It was a cradle. The revelation created two immediate responses: fear and opportunity. Striking it wouldn't just damage the Zartak infrastructure. It would disrupt their entire reproductive and memory transfer process. The war could be ended, not with occupation or diplomacy, but sterilization. Earth's military remnants convened in deep orbit around Titan, using a cloaked installation buried in the moon's crust. What remained of the World Defense Council authorized Operation Scorched Seed, a one-way assault designed to destabilize YX647's biosphere and destroy the Matrix. No expectation of survival. No option for surrender. Only calculated extinction. Resources were consolidated into a single vessel, the Oblivion Lance. It wasn't built for space combat but planetary incursion. Equipped with a gravitic core destabilizer, the ship carried enough power to disrupt tectonic integrity on a planetary scale. A suicide weapon disguised as a research vessel. Piloting it required neural fusion, direct brain integration. The Revenant selected was Elias Cade, a prototype who had surpassed all combat simulations but had never spoken a word since his augmentation. He volunteered without hesitation. As the Oblivion Lance departed Titan's shadow, Zartak sensors reacted instantly. Patrol ships converged, but they were slowed, not by accident, but by design. Simultaneous resistance offensives ignited across 10 sectors. Decoy signals, jamming bursts, and false pulse networks lured the Zartak away from their homeworld defense grid. For the first time, humanity wasn't reacting. It was orchestrating. The Oblivion Lance entered YX647's atmosphere cloaked under radiation echoes. The surface was almost silent. No opposition. No resistance. The predators never expected an attack on their heart. Beneath the crystalline spires, deep scans revealed the Matrix, a pulsating, root-like construct buried in a core chamber, connected through biotunnels spanning the planet's crust. It wasn't just genetic memory storage. It was how they reincarnated leadership. When one died, the Matrix reabsorbed its experiences. It was immortality through recollection. Cade initiated deployment sequence. The destabilizer descended into the Matrix core. As it armed, Zartak interceptors pierced the clouds. Dozens of them. Too late. Cade's neural fusion locked him into the ship. There was no abort. As their warships rained down plasma, the Oblivion Lance triggered core ignition. The result wasn't an explosion, it was a planetary hemorrhage. The spires collapsed inward as the crust ruptured. The matrix convulsed, its bioneural lattice torn from within. Waves of psychic disruption surged across the Zartak fleet. Across the galaxy, predator ships lost coordination. Some turned on each other. Others fled without direction. Command links dissolved. The Hive had been blinded. Earth's resistance immediately launched Phase 2. Targeted assaults against isolated Zartak units began across the outer systems. Without the Matrix, each predator was alone, instinctual, reactive, vulnerable. Their strategies frayed. Their formations collapsed. No backup arrived. No reinforcements transmitted. They fought as individuals and died as such. In less than 2 Earth months, over 60% of the Zartak fleet had been neutralized or lost. Colonies reclaimed territory once thought unrecoverable. Satellites blinked back online. Human voices returned to space. The psychological shift was irreversible. For the first time in the conflict, humans didn't see shadows in the stars. They saw targets. The hunted had become the hunters. And though millions had died, something stronger had emerged in their place. A species tempered by loss, bonded not by peace, but by defiance. The extinction once predicted had been redirected. Just not in the direction the Zartak expected. The war didn't end with silence. It ended with pursuit. After the fall of YX-647, scattered Zartak fleets tried to regroup across the Perseid expanse, seeking to re-establish their network. But the Matrix was gone. They no longer shared thought. No regeneration. No reincarnation. For the first time in their evolutionary history, they were dying permanently. Humanity didn't offer surrender. There were no negotiations, no treaties. This was not a war between civilizations. It had never been about territory or ideology. One side hunted. The other endured. And now, only one was still adapting. Revenant legions deployed in waves across sectors once considered lost. No longer hidden, no longer reactive, they struck with calculated aggression. Their tactics evolved faster than the Zartak could adjust. Deception replaced brute force. Ambushes replaced battles. Entire Zartak outposts went silent, their last transmissions corrupted with encoded human laughter, a psychological countermeasure designed to provoke disarray. What made the final campaign decisive wasn't superior firepower. It was psychological inversion. Humanity understood fear now not as a weakness but a tool, weaponized uncertainty. The Zartak, designed to dominate prey, had no structure for self-doubt. Without the shared mind of their matrix, they couldn't process defeat. What once made them efficient now made them brittle. Human commanders issued a directive: dismantle the myth. Every time a Revenant squad eliminated a Zartak cluster, they left messages behind, not in human languages, but in the Predator's pulse code. Each said the same thing: you are not the last. The intent was simple: strip away the illusion of dominance. Crush their belief in superiority. Make them feel what humanity had been forced to endure. It worked. Intercepted calm bursts recorded erratic movements. Squadrons abandoning posts. Leadership collapsing. On one fringe world, Zartak soldiers executed their own commander after he hesitated. Fragmentation replaced unity. For a species built on singular focus, the splintering was catastrophic. Meanwhile, human expansion resumed, carefully, strategically. Not to conquer, but to cleanse. Colonies were rebuilt with new protocols, perimeter AI sentries, deep-buried infrastructure, and multi-spectrum monitoring for any trace of biosignal activity. Every remnant was hunted down. Revenants tracked lone Zartak scouts across moons and planetoids, exterminating them like diseased cells. No mercy. No curiosity. By the 3rd year of the Counterstrike, over 90% of Zartak-controlled systems were purged. What few survivors remained vanished into deep space, stripped of purpose and power. Some believe they drift still, aimless, severed from their hive, unable to comprehend what they had lost. Others think they self-destructed, unwilling to exist without dominance. Humanity, too, had changed. What emerged was no longer the same species that once gazed upward with awe. That innocence had died alongside the first colony. In its place stood a civilization that had learned to think like its enemy, not just to defend, but to strike, to endure, and, when needed, to annihilate. The Revenant program was not retired. It was expanded. No longer a desperate experiment, it became Earth's vanguard, a permanent line between the known and the unknown. Its members no longer needed orders. They responded only to the whisper of threat, and they answered with precision. Earth itself transformed. No longer divided by borders or flags, it was unified by shared survival. Culture didn't vanish, it evolved. Art depicted not heroes, but perseverance. Monuments were raised not to generals, but to the unnamed who resisted when surrender seemed logical. Children grew up not afraid of darkness, but trained to master it. Hope wasn't an emotion, it was discipline. In the aftermath, a simple phrase circulated through every data network, school, and orbital post. We were not the strongest. We were not the fastest. We were the last to give up. The galaxy, once silent and unknowable, now listened differently. Other civilizations, some in hiding, some merely watching, sent emissaries to the new Earth. Not in pity. In caution. They had seen a species once marked for extinction rise, adapt, and turn on its hunters. They knew what the Zartak had learned too late. Humanity was not designed for peace or conquest. It was designed for pressure. And under pressure, it did not break. It evolved. The hunt was over. But the fire that lit it, rage, memory, determination, burned on. Not for revenge. Not for dominance. But to ensure that no shadow in the galaxy would ever again mistake humanity for prey.